Welcome to CapitolView, the weekly program where we talk about state politics and government and how it might just affect you. Joining us this week on CapitolView is Dave Dahl, State House reporter for WTAX Radio. Welcome, Dave.
You're looking good, Bruce. I'll take 2 scoops of chocolate there.
Hey, I'm out of it, but got lots of strawberry left. And also Amanda Vinicky, correspondent with WTTW television in Chicago. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks so much for having me, Bruce. And I, of course, prefer chocolate ice cream if you're asking.
Well, I'm a pistachio guy, but we can get that figured out later.
All right.
Later, this going on now in the Flavor of the Month Club at the Illinois State Legislature. Many things are happening. Number one, let's start with redistricting. This has been a topic of concern, not just here in Illinois, but all around the nation, as the census numbers come in and lawmakers are being asked to divvy up the state in districts that would promote democracy and make things good. Unfortunately, the census numbers are lacking, and here in Illinois, we have to get this done by, I believe, the end of June. Otherwise, it could be thrown to a bipartisan commission that would include both Republicans and Democrats.
Bipartisan? The horror.
The horror. Well, since you brought it up, Amanda, how likely is this to happen? What's the end game to this?
So bipartisan in that right now, because Democrats control supermajorities, of course, in both chambers of the legislature, as well as the governor's office, and frankly, every other statewide office, that they would be able to draw the map on their own. They would say, taking into consideration input from Republicans, as well as a whole lot of other organizations, entities, experts, etc. But right now, they can draw the map really themselves. And that is challenged because due to the coronavirus, also, I suspect some of the legal back and forth transition at the federal level from the Trump to the Biden administration, they're not getting the data that they need. That they would normally, you would have, staffers in a back room concocting all sorts of different situations, districts in one shape and another, and sort of figuring this out. They're not really able to do that. But so that's the complication for Democrats if they want to give up that power, or they don't want to give up that power, it seems. And so right now, they have heard some of the options for how, without that data or with that data coming later, what they can do. So maybe, draw up a map based on best guesses, other estimates, and then worry about fixing it, fine tuning it later. And that would really allow Democrats to be able to have that control, ostensibly to draw maps that give them a little bit of favor at the very least, or a whole lot of favor, depending on who you talk to. That's really what's at stake here.
Okay. And so, it is, the governor, J.B. Pritzker, has said, I want, a fair map here. I want something that's going to work for everybody, but we're not getting the sense, I guess perhaps I would be surprised if the Democrats said, you know what, because this year is so different, let's everybody sit around the table and say kumbaya. And might lawsuits be likely? I mean, might somebody go to court over something like this ultimately? Has that ever happened before? Well, of course it's happened before. So what do you do? I mean, is there any way out of this, in a sense, or for the Democrats to be able to say, look, it's been problematic, but we did the work of the state on behalf of what's best for everybody. Keeping in mind that Harman, I think, recently said it's not, some of the, weird shaped districts aren't necessarily bad. We need them to promote equity, and that is in some sense true. Folks' neighborhoods are different. Can they emerge from this with looking good, or will it inevitably be another, this is a partisan map? What do you think, Dave?
I think it'll be the latter, because people like to find things to complain about, and some people are quite good at that. And hearings are underway, but there aren't very many of them scheduled, and that has some people concerned as well. But I'm inclined to think that we'll get a lot of complaints.
Fair enough. Yeah. And as you say, Amanda, at this time of year, folks are supposed to be in back rooms concocting things.
Sort of a map potion, if you will. Yeah, Bruce, I mean, it's sort of one of those things where I think there is going to be criticism from perhaps no matter from some of the good government groups potentially, but it really depends on what this map looks like. And again, when you have Democrats in super majorities, they're not really going to point fingers at one another. And so I think that also one of the primary focus, as you mentioned there, is equity. We're going to see how this plays out as Illinois' Black population is dwindling some and the Latino population is on the rise. How that's going to look, what that will look like in Chicago, that might be where you really have some voices that get strong in this. That said, if many of the organizations that really are concerned with representation of Blacks, Latinos, people of color, diverse voices, if they work with Democrats and Democrats sort of protect those interests, well, sure, that they're not going to perhaps complain at the end. Who you would have complain at the end instead would, again, be more Republicans if they lose out on any districts, particularly at the congressional level. This isn't just the state house, but their voices are not as strong and loud as is evidenced, again, by the fact that they're super minority status.
Yeah. Oh, and it's not simply, I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, because at the federal level, we're likely going to lose one representative in Congress, given, how population has gone. And there's concern about that, I think, downstate. Certainly Rodney Davis is keeping a close eye on this, because who knows who he might be cast into a battle with. And so there's speculation that redistricting could force his hand in terms of what happens in the future. Whether this could affect perhaps on a state level. Again, downstate, we have a very Andy Menard's former district. I'm not sure anything's going to happen with that. At this point in time, it would seem to be staunchly Republican. Is there anything that might happen in the offing that might be able to affect how, the likelihood of who might prevail in the coming election through redistricting? So I don't think it's just a Chicago issue. It's an issue everywhere.
Well, I think it's for sure, as you indicated, that one of the 5 Republican members of the delegation is going to be left standing when the music stops. Just a question of which one. And when you hear who it might be, at first when Schimpf said he wasn't going to run again, that might have been an obvious choice. The vacancy now filled by Congresswoman Mary Miller. But it could be any of them, Bost, Kinzinger, Davis, or LaHood.
Yeah. It will be interesting, obviously, to see. And for right now, it seems like the Democrats, as always, whether it's the party that's in power, gets to deal the deck and start the game. And so we'll see how that obviously again plays out. Later today, we're taping, but by the time this comes out, we might know more about it, but already we know a bit about this. COVID restrictions are going to be relaxed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, who has taken quite a bit of heat in the past year for the measures he's taken, which he's been accused of shutting down unnecessarily economic prosperity. There has been spawned some measure of candidates, politicians who have pointed out things that they believe to be wrong in the handling of the COVID crisis, and now we're kind of on, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Will we be able to watch soccer, Cubs games, Lollapalooza? I mean, again, we think that these things are going to be relaxed in some respect. If you're the governor, can you claim victory out of this? Or is this just, this was a worldwide pandemic and we were cast in the ocean with everybody else?
Bruce, I think what you're asking is really like, are we going to be able to have any fun? Is what that sounded like.
I'm having fun.
And I think that really, again, this is nobody runs for office thinking that knowing what they're going to handle, least of all a pandemic, is certainly some very difficult decisions. And as you noted, there are some folks that are very angry at Governor Pritzker for taking so strong a hand, others that are unduly thankful, or that are incredibly thankful, not unduly so, for his taking all the precautions that they did to protect people's lives, because clearly this is a virus that is no joke. But now that we are at a point where phase 5 was supposed to be reopening, and when you read the state's guidance, that says when there's a vaccine, it doesn't really give any metrics for how many individuals, what percentage of the population needs to be vaccinated. And I think that's where even those that have stood by the protections are saying, hey, wait a second, we had all these metrics for shutting down. What about opening back up? Because as it stands, as of this taping, the phase 4 revitalization period, where I think gatherings are only 50 people, 50% capacity in restaurants, that sort of thing, that's too strict, given that cases are on the decline and more people are getting the vaccine. So we're going to get this sort of bridge, this intermediate phase. And I do think that's where you're going to perhaps see some conventions allowed, because the governor has talked about that. Now, it seems as if every breath where he says, yes, we're ready to ease up, he also has the asterisk, the caveat of, by the way, and this is something that I know I've heard from folks that are really frustrated. They see it as him trying to usurp power and just sort of scare people. He says, I'm not kidding, that when you talk about these variants, that is another time when we might have to, God forbid, roll back again. So one thing to keep in mind, no matter what changes, those masks are here to stay for quite some time.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, he has been, I think Pritzker to some degree has been the Andrew Cuomo of the Midwest without certain other baggage, i.e. I'm taking a very conservative approach here. I'm taking a worst case scenario, and as opposed to other states, notably Texas, I think, which is entirely reopened, and Florida, which never really shut down, and at least to the extent that we have. And so as we go on into, I mean, we always look ahead in the campaign season. Is this going to be, I mean, is it too early to say that the governor can say this is a merit badge on my sash in terms of why I should remain your governor?
Yeah, I think he wants to be careful about that when you think of all the people who have, been sick and dying. I think the governor is too smart to forget about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's move on for another second, because COVID, again, hey, and before we leave, everybody raise their hands who's gotten vaccinated. Okay, sorry. Hopefully you have not, Dave.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, Godspeed on that. Moving on, let's talk about the state budget here for a second. There's a hole in it, and there's been much talk about so-called decoupling, which has been rejected. Was rejected in the lame duck session. Is this the zombie issue that won't die, or how? It's called decoupling, which is hard for a lot of folks to understand what exactly is that. And what it really is, insofar as we can all discern, is that it's if decoupling occurs, then certain business owners might have to pay more in taxes than they otherwise would. What do we think? Is this something that Pritzker can push through at this point, or does he need to push it through, given the $1.9 trillion relief package recently enacted by the federal government?
That does buy you some time. Anytime you see something that looks like a tax increase, the Republicans are going to say, well, we told you so. And they had sold the graduated tax amendment as a tax increase, this, that, and the other. I think the governor realizes he really can't win when it comes to the Republicans. And for whatever talk there is about bipartisanship, I think for the most part, in the 2 years he's been governor, he's realized he hasn't had to deal with them. And I don't think he's suffered too much from that. And as far as the politics go, we'll see who the Republicans can put up there.
It wasn't the Republicans who said no during the lame duck session. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I was going to say this one to me, Republicans certainly did throw a stink, especially because they say that this was one of the big bipartisan deals that they'd made with the Pritzker administration. They see this really as a bait and switch after coming to an agreement. This was part of the Capitol bill, all of these taxes that's part of this broader issue. Then there's the decoupling as well, which, like you noted, is confusing, but it comes as taxes are already here. So some folks say it's too late. I think that it's not just Republicans who Pritzker has a problem with. There certainly are some Democrats who see this as problematic or also have some frustrations with the governor. And that's part of why he was not able to force this through during the lame duck session. If he doesn't get it done now, yes, I think at some point soon, I'm no tax expert, but one would think that time would be running out to get this done, given that despite the feds delaying the deadline, some people are really doing their taxes like now, and businesses especially are doing so. So time is running short.
But he does have another month.
Well, yeah, good point. We got a respite. But I get a refund this year. I'm hurrying up. But yeah, I mean, it is, it can't last for forever. If you can get some sort of if you can get rid of the decoupling issue through some other means, it would seem something, since a lot of folks don't understand it to begin with. And it can be difficult to explain. If there's some other exit, it would help. On the other hand, if that leaves a large hole in the budget, you got to get it done. And Amanda, your point is good. I think he's not at war just with Republicans. Democrats have not been in lockstep with this governor, and there have been several examples of that. Let's talk about cannabis here as one example, if we could. There's been multiple attempts by the Pritzker administration to fix, in a good way, a bill that has proven not to be what it was billed to be when it was passed. He has been unable to do so. Now there has come another effort at this. Is this a side issue? Could this become central? Is this death by 1,000 cuts, or how big of an issue is this that you can't get a signature measure? And this was a signature measure for the governor to be what he wanted it to be.
Well, the cannabis is a thing. It's bringing in a lot of money. And, I think if you go out and, go out to the old state Capitol Plaza, find 10 people, explain the story to them, and then record their reaction, I'm not sure if that many people are going to say, yeah, the fact that they really haven't come through on the minority ownership licenses, that's dragged the governor down. I'm not sure that that's an issue that resonates, statewide. What do you guys think?
Right. I think that for people who wanted cannabis to be legal, that's happened. There's places to buy it very easily. And so that isn't a problem for the public at large. It is a problem potentially with a key constituency. And that, of course, is both primarily actually Black legislators, as he's looking to get the rest of his agenda through, who are incredibly frustrated about this from the first time, and that there hasn't thus been a correction. So I think if this gets fixed soon, and the administration is going to have to give up some control, we're going to see perhaps more pot shops coming than had previously been considered. That might make things happen and turn and bring Black legislators on board. They're very happy. I think one of the critics really on this has been Representative LaShawn Ford. And this was interesting because the governor has and is expected to continue to sign into law the Black Caucus major agenda. And when the governor was signing recently the education bill, Representative Ford said, hey, I complain a lot to the governor about the governor. I admit that. I'm going to keep it up. But this, he said, is Pritzker's LBJ moment. And that was clearly a strong endorsement of Pritzker. So yes, this is a bit of an albatross, but it's not going to drag him down.
No, and fair enough. It is, and it's just what we have not seen the language of the bill at this point in time. What we've been told broadly is that it would result in, I believe, 115 more dispensaries being allowed to open in the state of Illinois, which would be roughly double. And don't hold me to the math exactly, roughly double than what we have now, which are controlled by a very small set of interests, many of them insiders and folks who right now have to some extent, a government subsidized near monopoly. It does not address who produces the product. It does not address, insofar as we know, who will grow the marijuana that would be sold at these dispensaries. And that's just one, that is probably a primary issue. But again, I think the point is well taken. To the average person, is it legal or not? I don't care about the details. On a broader level, it strikes to how does the government in Illinois, because this money does matter at some point. The more revenue we can produce, the more revenue that we can devote to social equity issues. And so the Black Caucus does, and they stand to, and their constituency stands to benefit directly from the growth of the cannabis industry. Not just on the, I can sell it, but there's something for those communities in terms of how the revenue from tax collections will be spent. So it's an interesting issue, and it's not going to be over anytime soon, I don't think. But if it's not an albatross, it might take a while. Let's talk for a second about Republican candidate for governor Paul Schimpf, who this week issued a press release saying, all of my senior staff are women. And how consequential is it? Didn't get a lot of splash. There wasn't a lot of folks saying what a great progressive step to take. What does it say that he would issue a press release like that?
Well, it means he thinks he can get some good publicity out of it. That's why you issue a press release about everything, and any advantage he can get. He's going to want to take, especially since he's trying to get earned media. His campaign doesn't have a lot of money yet. It may never have a lot of money. We'll see how many Republicans get on board with a primary. It seems like Senator Bailey's gotten a lot more publicity than former Senator Schimpf has. I don't think it matters a lot, other than he can put out a press release and maybe make a positive impression on people.
Yeah, and he did not say how many of these folks are involved. What I thought was interesting, and I have not gone to the State Board of Elections website to take a look at it, but he said, I have 15 paid people. And that I'm not saying that hints of desperation, but when you say that, it almost sounds like what you suggest, Dave. He's an underdog in terms of finances right now. Do we think who else? Might possibly Kinzinger? Well, scratch that. No. Well, Republican Kinzinger. Who else could? Rodney Davis. Who else could be joining this pool?
That I think is what everyone is waiting for, Bruce. And frankly, it hasn't gotten. I think the Republican primary hasn't gotten a ton of coverage yet. Number one. I don't know about y'all, even as a political reporter, it's like, already? Oh. We've got enough that we're dealing with. We're still in a pandemic. There's a lot there. I think that's part of it. Again, frankly, Bailey doesn't have a ton of money either, but he does have a lot of very strong positions, particularly when it comes to COVID, and has therefore made a name for himself, gotten attention from some, again, by whom he's beloved, and others for whom he is almost like a Trump 2.0. And so I think that There is an expectation of waiting to see who else enters the fray. Kinzinger has really said, no, not going to be him. Still, I think there are some who had that expectation. Rodney Davis. We know that now Representative Tom Demmer has talked about running statewide for something, because, by the way, we will also have a race for Secretary of State. And at least on the Democratic side, whoa, is that going to be a very crowded primary? But we don't yet have really any GOP folks declared. So we'll have that is going to be another big race that I'm kind of waiting to see who all enters the fray.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Secretary of State, glad for bringing that up. What's the over/under on how many candidates both sides? I'm putting it at 8. That's just me.
Almost as many people as there are flavors of ice cream, to bring this full circle.
Yeah.
And with that said, we're out of time now, and so hopefully we'll all be able to gather in the parks on Saturdays and eat ice cream together soon enough. And so welcome or help. Thank you for joining us on Capitol View. We will see you next week.